in production. And now we go to the industry itself, and Frank Macchiarola, he is American Petroleum Institute Senior Vice President. Frank, thank you so much for being with us. What is the reaction, if you can say, for the industry, the U.S. industry, to this development?
Thanks for having me on, David. Look, this announcement is just another reminder of how important it is to not rely on foreign sources for our energy, but to produce more of the energy that we need right here in the United States. And we can do that. We just need the right policy signals from Washington, D.C. to make it happen.
What do you think about the release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Is that good?
Look, I think it's a fundamental, short-termism from this administration. They're operating in a short-term election cycle rather than being strategic with a long-term energy policy. Since the start, this administration has reduced leasing on federal lands. They've canceled pipeline projects. They've increased taxes on domestic producers. And now they want to turn around and flip a switch and get energy back quickly. The system just doesn't work that way.
Is the industry prepared to make the investments necessary to increase production, given some of the uncertainties over the longer term related to climate?
Look, I think there's no question that this industry needs signals from Washington, D.C. that oil and gas is going to be valued from this administration and by policymakers. The independent experts tell us that for decades, we're going to continue to use oil and natural gas. And so the critical question for policymakers is whether that should come from foreign sources or more of it should come from the United States. We have the opportunity to develop our own resources. Look, as a result of the shale revolution, we went from producing about 7 million barrels per day in the United States to up to 12 million barrels per day. We can do even more, but we need signals from policymakers that the oil and natural gas industry is going to be promoted here in the United States, that we're going to use our own resources, and that we're not going to institute policies that transition us away too quickly from these critical resources.
Frank, if Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia gets his way and gets the so-called permitting reform that he sought, will that be an important signal to the industry?
Permitting reform is very important, David. We were pleased to see Senator Manchin, Senator Capito, and others offer their ideas about infrastructure reform, about permitting reform. We actually released our own plan here at API called the 10 and 22. It called for more domestic production. It called for infrastructure reform, for permitting reform. It called to reduce the barriers on tariffs, to alleviate the supply chain constraints that producers and operators are having. It called to provide a policy and regulatory environment that promotes American energy, because the solution, David, does not lie in OPEC. The solution lies under our feet in areas like the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, in the Permian Basin in Texas. These are the places, and the American oil and gas industry, those are the people that have the solution to the energy challenges that we face today.
Whether it's the Manchin proposal for permitting reform or the broader proposal that you just described, is there any chance of that getting done? And more pointedly, does that chance change depending on what happens in the midterms 5 weeks from right now?
Look, we're hopeful that something can get done. We think, even in a divided government, there's the opportunity for reform. In fact, if you look just a few years ago, when they lifted the crude oil export ban, which had been in place for years, that was done during divided government. That was done during a Republican Congress and the Obama administration. That's had tremendous benefits for America's energy security. So regardless of the outcome of the election, we're going to continue to promote American energy. Part of that is going to be a robust permitting reform that knocks down these barriers to infrastructure. Because look, at the end of the day, what we need is a regulatory structure that is reliable, that's predictable, and that ultimately brings energy from areas where we produce it to areas where we need it.
Frank, one more, if I could, on that OPEC Plus cut that they announced today. Does it really make much of a difference in the real world? Because a lot of those countries were not performing up to their max anyway. Doesn't it just bring their number into line with what they're actually doing?
Well, we'll have to see, David. But certainly the 2 days leading up to the announcement There were a lot of rumors about what it was going to be, and certainly the market reacted. And certainly the administration is reacting. They're looking for ways to increase supply. What we would tell them is to look to the plan that we released, the 10 and 22 plan. This administration has leased fewer acres on federal lands and waters than any administration since the Second World War. They need to reverse their policies, and we'll see outcomes change.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us, Frank. That's Frank Macchiarola. He is American Petroleum Institute Senior Vice President. Coming up.